All right, folks, Darth checking back in one more time with you. So, we've got 2 books left, and about an hour and a half till the show drops. If the timing is accurate and it is 7 EST when it drops, that would be amazing. So, let's cover those 2 books. Let's cover them efficiently here. It's pretty much just wrapping up the story. So we're talking about Towers of Midnight. We're talking about A Memory of Light. Each of them probably deserves their own episode, but here we are, right? And I don't know what I can say about these books that isn't just rehashing the plot to you. I got to thinking about that on my last few reviews. That's what this sort of devolved into, because honestly, I had more to say about the foreshadowing of the series, and we're not in a spot where we're doing foreshadowing anymore, except as a, immediate payoff within the novel thing. Now we're just talking about the conclusion to everything. And I suppose that I'll get into some of the speculation and theory crafting surrounding that as well. There are entire swaths of these books that I've just skipped over, and I do feel a bit bad about that, but there's not enough time, and off the cuff it's hard to manage, to remember everything. There we go. So, Towers of Midnight, we've got Egwene's reunified tower. We've got the White Tower finally whole again after, actually I think that's pretty well where we start. Of course we start with Almond Bunt and Rand running down, becoming Zen Rand. I did not coin that term. But we've got Rand running down and making the apple blossoms bloom. And that's a pretty neat sequence there. It kind of makes sense in the lore, but I think the rule of cool plays into effect on that one. So we've got Rand doing his stuff, and we also we have Egwene reunifying the tower by killing a lot of Aes Sedai. She is fully realized as a character by this book. I think that the only touch left with her is the Gawain stuff, and he's kind of a pain in the ass in this book, but he was in the others as well. It's one of those troubles. I tried to describe this and think I did a poor job of it in the last book. Gawain is a well-written character, but that does not make him likable. And to some extent, he's a sympathetic character. I can understand and feel bad for him for what his experience has been, and recognize that experience informed on his decision making and his worldview. But that doesn't mean that it's enjoyable to read through, or that there's that there's a quirkiness to it that people can grow fond of, etc. Gawain is pretty much an example of an unlikable protagonist, or I guess deuterotagonist, because he's not really like the protagonist, but he is a protagonist in the series. Alright, so we go through that whole bit. I will say, him with the blood knives was pretty cool. I liked that. I don't like what happens with him taking the blood knife rings, but I do like how it pays off in the story later on in his fight with Demon Dread, because it helps reinforce why Demon Dread does not attack of his own volition. or at least not in a highly substantial way, right? So that's a cool little sequence there, him protecting Egwene in the world of dreams. Her having her fight with Masana is really good. Again, the Forsaken, not very potent at what they do if they can be beaten by, people who have been using the one power for 2.5, 3 years. That is, to my mind, a weakness of this series. I understand that if it goes too long, it's unrealistic for how much trauma these people could bear and carry around with them. But I do feel like the Wheel of Time spread over 4 years would make a little more sense than it being spread over 2.5. And I'll also point out that you could keep up with the entire Wheel of Time based on the cycles of the moon up until around the time that Brandon Sanderson starts writing, and then we lose track of that. That's kind of a shame, I think, but there's not much to be done about it. I don't know if he knew that and maybe it was an oversight or wasn't in Robert Jordan's notes, or if he didn't recognize it and it's just one of those things that went by the wayside, or if it's intentionally supposed to show us that here's another effect of time being distorted as everything, as reality is starting to crumble. All of these things are getting out of sync with one another, which would be interesting. I haven't seen much to support that, and it's such a nitpick. I mean, you gotta really read the series to figure out that the moon cycles line up, and you can use those to cross-reference where characters are at certain times. Speaking of which, we do this really weird step backwards in this book, where we jump backwards to Perrin's story, and he still has Tam, and it's jarring because we just saw Tam interact with Rand, and we had the sequence where Matt helped Nynaeve figure out where Perrin was, so that Catswing could send Nynaeve to get Tam, so on and so forth. So it's a little jarring to go back in time and see all the events that lead up to that moment when Tam comes and visits Rand at the end of The Gathering Storm. It's even kind of hard for me to talk about. It's just a little confusing. I do think that there is something satisfactory about the way that Morghese reveals herself to be a queen in the preceding trial with the White Cloaks, and since I didn't mention it in the last book, the death of Eamon Valda was nice. I guess I also didn't mention in general much about White Cloaks through this whole thing. Most of the time, they are a pain in the ass to read, the same way that they're a pain in the ass for our characters to interact with. I think one of the best White Cloak sequences in the entire series is in the very first book, when Perrin gets thrown a rock by Child Buyer, and Lan shows up behind him and knocks him unconscious. That's a really good sequence that helps us kind of learn about the sort of seething evil. Jacob, Joaquin, however you pronounce him, Carradine, that guy sucks, and of course he gets killed by getting a whole bourbon barrel tipped over and funneled into his mouth until he drowns. Later on, I don't even think they mention his name when that happens. They might. So his parts suck. The parts with young Bornhold suck. His dad was cool. Buyer obviously is terrible. Gilad is frustrating at first, but you kind of come to love him as a character because he is so consistent. You just gotta admire that, I suppose. Besides that, he does cool stuff. He's what Gawain was trying to be, right? So he does cool things, and he actually ends up helpful. Him and Perrin play off of each other really well. Baller's good. I like Baller. So we can talk about all the White Cloaks. The thing that I'll say about the White Cloaks that bugs me the most, I really, really, really liked Pedron Nile. And when he died in Lord of Chaos, his death felt to me like when Bryan Cranston dies in Godzilla 2016. It's just, you took away a really good character, and they would have been a fantastic, foil to our protagonists and what they were doing. Maybe that had to happen. Maybe it's unrealistic to think that Rand would have survived the assassination attempts, or that Pedron Nile wouldn't have succeeded in his plans. I mean, the dude had Admiral Thrawn vibes going, so it's hard to say. But I liked his character, and when he died, with him died my interest in the Children of the Light. Yeah. So, seeing Valda's death was nice. I think that actually happened in Gathering Storm. And Asanawa's as well, off-screen. He didn't deserve an on-screen death, I suppose. But, I don't know, the trial that happens here, it is set up well. It's got some neat mystery to it. I like the things that Grendel is doing with the dream spikes at this point in the series, or Slayer, I guess. I like how it is informing us on Perrin's plot development, because Perrin does have the most growth in these last 3 books. I think that Robert Jordan kind of lost sight of what to do with him, and so Brandon Sanderson had to come up with a lot of it, which is good. That Sanderson did what he did with the character. He expanded him a lot, and kept him from going the route of Superman. Of course, the Superman issue being that Superman always has to save Lois Lane, and it's like the only plot device that drives his character. Justice and doing good aren't character motivation. That's why you need personal stakes. Perrin was going down that path with Fael. It was nice to see him recognize a book or two ago that he wouldn't let him go that far again in the future, that if he had to, he would, let her fight her own battle and die if she had to. So that way he continued, that way he didn't let down his duty. That was a neat obstacle to see him overcome, and I think that his leadership ability has just clearly grown in leaps and bounds over the last couple of books. So Perrin's character's good. Matt doesn't have anything to do until the latter half of this book, when we get the big action sequence with him and Tom and Noel. I will say, Noel is a character that, his story is basically entirely off-screen, and I talked about that several reviews ago. And I just love the Jaime Farstrider story here. I love the setup and payoff with Oliver. I think that's when I talked about it, actually. There's something really touching about him coming back as a hero of the Horn and saving Oliver, that it's hits you right there, So his death in this is also impactful. That guy gets the feels. He's just likable. I don't know why. I don't really understand what makes that character likable, but he is. He is. He almost takes away the storyteller vibe that Tom has going on when Tom's around him. And I remember the first time I read through these books, that hit me, and then immediately afterwards, finding out about Tom and Moraine hit me, and I was just so confused by the setup that had happened for both of these. I like that, mind you. If I had to pick between being too subtle and too blunt, I would pick that the author be too subtle. That gives me something to go back and explore, you know? But this book definitely had its own revelations, and they were generally pleasant ones. I think Towers of Midnight's a good book. I also, I kind of skirted over the Rand stuff here. Rand is going back and fixing the things that he blundered as a result of the events of the past couple of books. Perrin gets to see his Dragonmount revelation from another perspective, and we get the Wolves' take on it, which is that if Rand hadn't made the right choice there, that would have been the end of everything. That's all really cool. That's really neat world-building stuff. I like that everything with Teleran Riyadh is just really neat. I don't know what else to say about that. It is such a unique concept for a fantasy series, and I want more of it, honestly. I wish there was even more in the series, and that we took a deeper dive into astrophysics and metaphysics and how this universe is connected with other mirrors of itself, what the Forsaken are doing in them, how the world of dreams ties it together. I wish we went more into that. That would be so cool to see in this world. But Rand spends the book kind of righting his wrongs. One thing I haven't talked about here, Meridon. Meridon was freaking awesome. I've skipped over a lot of action in the last few books. The sequence where in Knife of Dreams, Luz Theron takes over Rand's hands is really cool, and we get to see what a more experienced channeler would be like, what they would be able to do with the One Power, which subsequently detracts from, the Forsaken, who should be doing that. We get to see Meridon, and like I told you guys, my favorite is Ashaman Deep, so that stuff's great. We get to see more Andral and Logain and Pavara storylines, and those are really dark, actually. When they're all trapped in the sort of underground cellar underneath the Black Tower, that's probably one of the darkest parts of the series. It's just some really good stuff. Also, Avienda is in this book. Her and Elaine are there. They're just kind of doing stuff. I think Avienda gets sent off to Ruidian, and we don't come back to her until the next book, or maybe she meets Naomi. In any case, I don't know what's going on there. We can talk about all of it anyways, because I'm talking about A Memory of Light right now, too. So, Avienda's vision of the future in Ruidian, actually, pretty much every scene with a vision in Ruidian is fantastic. It's some of the greatest scenes in The Wheel of Time. I like that Robert Jordan told us back in the very beginning of the series everything that was going to happen in the series in like a paragraph or two in those visions and in the prophecies of the dragon, and now it's all coming to fruition, and all of those little simple details are adding up into something so much greater. I always thought that was brilliant, that he just basically tells you, there's a sentence or two from Herod Fell or Men somewhere in there, where he just tells you what's going to happen at the end of the series, and it doesn't make any sense at the time, but the ending is perfect, How do you defeat a dark god? With a philosophy battle? That's amazing. That's amazing, you know? So all of these threads being woven together, there's so much payoff at the end of this series. We've got Rand fighting the Trolloc horde at outside of Meridon, of course, after Rhoda Literalda goes through hell, or Ituralda, yeah. We've got, the Forsaken compelling all of the great captains, and Matt becoming the only great captain that's left, leading into the last battle, and playing it perfectly. That chapter is slightly longer than Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and I read it in one sitting every time that I read it. It's like just injected into my veins. It is so good. And there's a ton of moments like that. My only real critiques of these books are that I honestly don't know if I have much of one for Towers of Midnight. There's nothing wrong with it, but for some reason it feels like the Two Towers. It feels like the middle book, and so it's not quite as fast and it's not quite as engaging. I really wish that Brandon Sanderson's ending to this were 2 parts, but I can see why it's not. There's not a way to fit it into 2 parts, but it doesn't quite feel like it needs to be 3. I wish we had less Andrel, because I still don't like that character. I think that his power is busted, and sure, it might be an inventive use of his abilities, like a lot of Brandon Sanderson characters, but it doesn't fit within the groundedness of the Wheel of Time. So he just feels out of place to me. He just does. I like Logain. I like what he's up to. So no real issues there. I'll tell you what I don't like. I don't like starting book 13 with a one-off perspective from a character from a plot line that nobody cared about in the first place. Or book 14, I should say. Because if you recall, A Memory of Light actually starts off with the husband of one of Elaine's competitors for the Lion Throne losing his army. And he loses his army because all of their metal turns to mush, basically. And that, as an entry point to the final book of the Wheel of Time, every time I read it, the first time I read it, I didn't care. I just wanted to get through it, and I wanted to get on to the other stuff. But every time I see it, it grates a little bit more and a little bit more. It just didn't need to be there. So, never been terribly fond of that. It takes up too much valuable space. I tell you what I would have rather had. I would have rather had Andrel not be OP and use regular spells like everybody else does, or weaves, And I would have rather had Andrel's character subsequently take up about half the space that he does. And I would have loved to have seen where all of the Emmons Fielders find themselves in a room together one more time. Because we never get that. We never get the one moment that was really good in Season 8 of Game of Thrones, where they're all sitting there around a fire talking to each other. I wanted that. Especially considering how the series ends, because at the end, it is so bittersweet, Egwene is gone. Rand, nobody knows that he's alive, except for Cadsuane and the 3 girls, of course. Maybe Moraine. Moraine's too clever to not know. And Tom will figure it out from her, I'm sure. There's just, there's so much there. And it feels incredibly bittersweet. I could definitely do with a 20 years later style epilogue. just to visit those characters one more time and see what they're up to. And since we're on this, thing I didn't talk about was Moraine. Moraine showing back up. The reaction that Rand has when he sees Tam, and the reaction he has when he sees Moraine. If those don't hit you in the heart, I don't know, man. Those are two lovely moments that I have no good words for. I don't have a way to express how I feel about them. It's wow, you know. That's really where the Wheel of Time is always at its strongest. It pulls together all of these elements that it sets up excellently, expertly, and it turns them into real character moments that you, the reader, feel. When it's doing that for a guy like me, honestly, I'm usually a pretty unfeeling person. So, I don't know. I think that the series speaks to people on a different level than a lot of other series, and that's where it's found its success. It's got something intangible, something real about it, you know. It's about an hour now until the series premieres, and I told my wife the other day that I'm about to meet some friends that I've been waiting to meet all my life, and that's what it feels like, you know. So I think Towers of Midnight is an 8.5. I think A Memory of Light's a 10 out of 10. It's a fantastic book. I don't care about any flaw that you might perceive with it or that it might even have. I don't even care about my own qualms with it. It is it's just a stunning piece of work, and I couldn't imagine a better conclusion to the series, or really to a series, than what happens. It's creative, it subverts expectations, it's incredibly satisfying, and it in no way demeans the stakes that it built up. So, y'all, this is me officially signing off, about to go watch episodes 1, 2, and 3, and I will be back to share some reviews of those with you and continue this journey together. Have a great evening.